Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. It's nice to see so many of you here. So today's webinar is about automated testing of Azure infrastructure as a service VMs backed up by Azure Backup. So my name is Szabo. I'm the founder and the CTO of Wenenu, and Francisco is here with me. He's a co-founder of Wenenu. So we are going to provide a live demonstration of how to test systems or applications deployed on Azure VMs backed up by Azure Backup automatically without any human intervention. So first of all, Francisco is going to give a little presentation about backups and the importance of backup testing in general, and then I'm going to take over for a live demonstration, and we are going to close the webinar with a questions and answers session. So please, Francisco, do the presentation.
Hello everyone. So yeah, everyone here is probably aware of the importance of having backups, but not everyone is the same. And I guarantee you one thing: sooner or later you will need to restore a backup. I will tell you a couple anecdotes I was involved with. The first one was a startup in the field of bodybuilding and sports nutrition. They had an online shop. They started off small, but they were growing a lot. By the time they hired me to write a couple PrestaShop modules, they were one of the biggest online shops in the country for sports nutrition. I quickly noticed they didn't have any backups. I managed to convince the owner about getting a backup service in place. He did it. After a while, they contacted me again just to fix the site is down, this classic error. And I found out that they simply forgot to pay the bill of their dedicated server. The dedicated server was wiped out. Unfortunately, they also considered that the backup service was not important enough to be paying for it. So this company was effectively deleted off the face of the earth, and they never came back. Another similar case, albeit it had a happy ending, was with a tax consultancy company. They again didn't really care about backups because they considered that a hassle and an unnecessary expense. They got infected with a ransomware called CryptoLocker, which was popular back in the day. For those of you who don't know, this type of malicious software typically encrypts your data and then asks you to pay a ransom in cryptocurrencies or any other way. This company, since they got all their data encrypted, had to finally bite the bullet, and they paid the ransom. So there you go. The idea about saving money proved a complete disaster. Those were extreme cases of companies without any backups, not intention to really have one. Other companies have backups and disaster recovery plans, but they won't test them. And we know that if they are not tested, they won't probably fail when you need them the most. So we'll see some examples. Gitlab, which is a multi-million-dollar company, you probably know it. You might even be using some of their tools. Back in 2018, I will keep this long story short. If you are interested, please read that link below because it's a good read. But long story short, they needed to restore a backup. Yes, they were aware of the importance of protecting their data. In fact, they had 5 different strategies, but none of them worked because some of them were writing empty files, others were using incompatible versions of the tools, others were not uploading anything to their S3 buckets. So in the end, they had to restore a 6 hours old LVM snapshot. This was really bad because that amounted to 300 gigabytes of customer data that was simply lost. Pixar, this 100% sure you know this company and Toy Story 2. Toy Story 2 was about to be lost forever when Pixar realized that one employee, very proactive and motivated, was doing some tidying up. This employee deleted everything because the network volumes were mounted when he ran the delete command. At first, Pixar thought they were safe because they had backups in tapes, but they also panicked when they realized the backups were basically corrupt. When this happened, Pixar was not the giant it is today. They could have been basically destroyed by this catastrophic data loss because they couldn't probably remake the movie without going bankrupt. Luckily for them and probably for everyone, because we had Toy Story 2 thanks to an employee who had gone on maternity, working from home. Before she went, she took a backup of the data, so they recovered most of it. Although Gitlab and Pixar survived, there were costs involved, reputational and monetary, because all the time invested in recovering the data, all the unhappy customers in the case of Gitlab, those had a big impact. Yet they survived. Other companies weren't that lucky. You are invited to search on the internet. I found some examples of companies that didn't make it. After the personal anecdotes and those two popular companies that serve an example, there's also a lot of research on this subject. Basically, small firms are very vulnerable to data loss, but even big companies are very unlikely to disappear if they can't come back quickly enough after a disaster hits. In the case of ransomware, which we have seen, there's a positive note. If you have a proper backup and disaster recovery solution in place, that also includes having tested it, ransomware are not as bad as it sounds, putting the data leaks aside. If you look at the chart at the bottom, we see that close to 30% of the companies have either no plan or haven't tested their plans. If you see, I am equating both because a plan not tested is a plan you can't really trust. Then 63% of the companies have manually tested plans. That is not totally bad, but it's a waste of resources, and it means the moment you stop testing, you can't be sure your plan still works. So it could have stopped working, and in production, 2 or 3 days worth of content lost can mean a lot. Then only 10% of the companies are testing their plans automatically. This is where Wenenu shines. We hope to make this 10% number much bigger one, and you'll see how Wenenu can help. I'm gonna give the microphone back to Peter.
Thank you for that, Frank. So, as Frank said, that any backup solution is only as strong and robust as well it's tested. So basically, if the backup solution is not tested, then we can't be sure that it's going to work when a real disastrous event hits. So today in the live demonstration, we are going to test this test scenario. So we have this fictional workload setup, which is inside an Azure virtual network, a web server and a database server, and these two are running a WordPress site at the moment, because this is just fictional, but it could be an HR system, an ERP system, file server, or basically any type of system or application that is important for an organization. And so this virtual network is connected to our office via secure connection. And we basically use this WordPress site for day-to-day work. And what we would like to do is to periodically, sometimes, restore these machines into another virtual network in Azure. In this case, the virtual network that is labeled the restore virtual network, and test if these servers can work in that environment. So they are still functional. The database server starts on them, and everything is configured well with the web server and so on. So basically, I could go out and start to put together scripts, PowerShell, Azure CLI to make this happen, to restore these machines, and then put together something that would test this. But then I would need to find some place to run this code, schedule it, alerting if something goes bad, which is a lot of hassle, and it's pretty man-hour intensive, so it's also costly. So that's what we try to do here at Wenenu, that we provide a solution as a form of a software as a service application that solves the repetitive task, like every test should restore the VMs, do some alerting, do some reporting, stop the VMs. So this is automated by our system, while it's also a very flexible and distributed testing architecture. So every test step in a test scenario runs on a test agent in the case of Wenenu, and these test agents can be placed by Wenenu automatically to certain locations. Like in this case, on the right side, the diagram shows that Wenenu can put a test agent in an Azure failover site or a VNet where the VMs are restored, and also the users can install these agents in another cloud location or data center or in an office location. So the testing is possible comprehensively for different locations, and we can conclude at the end that this is still working, our backup is in good shape, and it's going to work in a case when something happens. During the live demo, it's going to be more it's going to be clearer that what I mean by this distributed testing. And Wenenu also provides pre-built wizard-style test steps for testing, common things like HTTP calls or database connection or SSH connection, as well as custom code execution test steps for the more comprehensive test scenarios where the simple steps are not enough. And these test scenarios that in Wenenu that Wenenu provides or can be put together in Wenenu, these can be scheduled for execution at scheduled intervals, and also Wenenu does reporting and alerting with these test scenarios. So basically, Wenenu is a setup and forget type testing suite that once the test is set up, then it can be scheduled, it can be left there, and it's going to run every night, every week, every month, depending on the use case, and then a report is sent out to the set email addresses saying that everything is still fine, so this is working. So companies and organizations can have the peace of mind that their backup solution is still robust. It's going to work when some disastrous event happens. So that concludes the presentation part of this webinar. So now I'm just going to switch over to the live demonstration. as I said, I'm going to show first in the Azure portal. As I said, we have these two machines, the DB one and the web one. So basically, it's just a tutorial. It's not really under high load, and this is just a tutorial setup. But we have these two machines, the web one and the DB one. The DB one runs the database for the WordPress site, and the web one machine it runs the web server itself. And so these two are backed up by Azure Backup with a native solution into a recovery vault, and we are going to restore these into a virtual network that's also prepared already in Azure. And these two virtual networks are connected to our Office network, so we are going to be able to test the connectivity to this server through the VPN as well. So I'm currently on our website, wenenu.com. So Wenenu is authenticated. The authentication and the authorization is done by Azure AD. So if I click login, I will just find myself logged in to the application, because SSO works. I was already logged into Azure AD. And I'm going to go to the scenarios, and I'm going to put together a new test scenario here for the scenario I just explained a little bit earlier. But before I do that, first I would like to just take a detour and talk a little bit about what a test agent is. And a test agent inside the application is basically just a logical entity. I can create a new agent, and once that's created, it's going to give me two keys, two for key rotation, but basically one key is enough. And this is used to authenticate the test agent. And the test agent runs as a Docker container, so basically it can be run everywhere where a Docker container can run. And so I started up with this key. If I copy this key, I could start up a test agent on any location where I would like to do that. And I give this key at the startup, so the test agent can register itself with Wenenu, and then it can execute test steps. So I have already one running here in my Office location, and this is going to be used, this test agent, to test the connectivity from the Office to the restored machines later. So I'm going back to the scenario, and I'm going to create a new scenario. I'm going to say Wenenu webinar, and I need to specify a report time zone. So every report that's created after the scenario executions is going to be in the selected time zone. So I'm going to select Europe and London, because that's where we are in the UK. That's my time zone. So I create this new test scenario, and this is the scenario edit page. The test steps are on the left. It's currently empty, and the selected steps settings are on the right. And I'm going to start with adding a step. And because we want to restore Azure Backup VM, so I'm going to select the Azure Backup VM step. That added two steps to the list on the left side, and one is to start or restore these VMs, and the other step is to delete those VMs that were restored. So every test scenario is sequential. The test steps on here on the left, they are executed from top to bottom, and so I'm going to use this to start and stop or delete these VMs. So first of all, when I set up this Azure Backup VM step, I need to select a service connector. And so a service connector is also a logical entity inside Wenenu, which is basically it's going to be used to communicate with the ARM, the Azure APIs, and every communication to the Azure API is always going through these service connectors. In the case of Azure, the service connector is basically an Azure service principal that can be created in Azure AD, and then that service principal needs to have the right permissions in Azure to perform the restore and the delete of the virtual machines later. And basically, the service connector in Wenenu is just the ID of the service principal and the secret, so that Wenenu can use to authenticate with the Azure API. So I'm just going to select here the Wenenu service connector. I set this up earlier, and then this loads automatically over the rest of the data using the service connector as authenticating to the API with the service connector. So I need to first select the subscription if the service principal has access to multiple subscription, then I can select those. In this case, it's only connected to our subscription. And the next, it takes a while, it seems to load. We need to wait a moment, it's loaded. And the next step is to select the recovery vault where my VMs that I said, the web one and the DB one, are backed up. In this case is our Wenenu tutorial North recovery vault. I need to select a target resource group. So this is the resource group where the restored machines are going to be placed in. And in this case, I'm going to select the Wenenu Frank test, which is Francisco's test resource group. And there is a staging location is also needed. The staging location is a storage account. So these things are required by Azure itself to restore a virtual machine. If I would do this on the Azure portal, then I would also need to give a staging location. So this is just a storage account. In this case, I'm going to select the Wenenu backups one, and the virtual network is going to be, the target virtual network will be where the restored machines are going to be placed. So the currently running machines, the live system is in the Wenenu tutorial VNet, and I'm going to select the Wenenu tutorial VNet 2 that I prepared earlier, and I'm going to restore the machines into that VM. And once I selected the virtual network, Wenenu lets me to select subnets from that virtual network. So in this case, I have a web and the DB subnet in this virtual network, and selecting these subnets, if I select a subnet, then Wenenu will place a test agent on a virtual machine in the selected subnet. So in this case, I am only selecting the web subnet because that's enough for my case at the moment. So Wenenu is going to restore those the selected virtual machines into that virtual network, and it's also going to it will also put another virtual machine in the web subnet, and it's going to put a Wenenu test agent on top of that, so I can use that machine to test the rest of the machines in that virtual network. So once that's selected, I'm going to select which machines or which VMs I want to restore from this recovery vault. So I have the DB1 and the V1. I'm also backing up a Win1 machine, but I'm not going to add that at the moment. So these two are added, and for both of these machines, I need to select a subnet in the selected virtual network where they are going to be placed. So I'm going to place the DB1 machine in the DB subnet, and I'm going to place the Web1 machine in the web subnet. And so this step is going to restore these, and the stop Azure Backup step is going to delete these machines, the restored machines, and as well as the test agent. So now I can add the steps that are actually related to the test. So this is a WordPress site. So first I want to add an HTTP test step, and for every other test steps apart from the Azure Backup one and a few other special steps, I always need to select the place of execution, which is basically which test agent is going to execute this test step. And in this case, I can see my standard standard test agents that I just created as standalone agents, and I also see the Azure Backup one in the subnet web that I just selected to be placed there. So I'm going to select the web subnet. So the host is going to be the web one. I can just use web one because it's in the same virtual network. So I'm going to use an HTTP 443 port. HTTPS protocol. I'm going to disable the SSL certification validation because this host is not the host that usually the machine is reached with. The method is going to be get, and I'm going to get the root of this web server, and I'm not going to send any body or headers with this request. So basically, this is going to be good to test if the web server is actually is responding, because this test step fails if the HTTP response is incorrect, or if the response code is anything apart from a 2XX. So in the 200 range, everything is okay, but if it's a 404 or 500 or anything else, then the test step will fail. And also, I'm going to add another test step, which is basically going to be a database connection. I'm going to run this from the from the test agent in the web subnet again. So I'm going to use this to try to connect to the database, because if this step is successful, then we know that everything was good. But for example, if these steps, the first HTTP steps, so I'm going to rename this that HTTP from VNet. And if this step fails, then I want to know if the database, if connecting to the database is good or not. So I can do that, like I'm selecting a MySQL server type here. The host is going to be DB1. The port is going to be 306. The database name is WordPress, and the user is also WordPress. And the password, I could just type the password here, but I don't want to do that. So I can add variables to a test scenario. And in this case, I'm going to add the variable that's called db-pvd. I'm going to make this as a secret, and I'm going to set the password here instead of using it plain text. Making this secret means that once it's stored on our side, it's never going to be given back, and when we store that securely, and we only use it for testing purposes. So then I can use this as a variable. The variable usage is like this, that I can say that I would like to use the variable db-pwd in this field, and then it's going to be this steps is going to connect to the database. I could add an SQL statement if I would run something, let's say some housekeeping job in a stored procedure or something like that. But now I only want to test the connectivity. So this step is going to connect to the database, at least try to connect. And if the connection is successful, then it will finish. If it's unsuccessful, then it is going to fail. And another thing that I would like to test is whether the response from the HTTP server is a lengthy response or not, because some misconfiguration can happen. And while I can, in this step, I get back a 200 response, but maybe it's an empty response, or some other page, some configuration page or something like that. So what I would like to do, I would like to check the length of the response. And so the HTTP, the SSH, and the database connection, these are our pre-built steps, wizard type test steps. And the rest of the steps, apart from the manual, these are custom code execution. So I can choose my preferred language, let's say PHP, Python, Node.js, or scripting languages by PowerShell, Bash, .NET Core, Java, and I can write more elaborate tests using these programming languages. And I'm going to talk about the manual step a little bit later too. In this case, I'm just going to choose PHP, because what I would like to do is that get the response from the web server and check. It's a very simple check. I'm going to check if the response is longer than 5,000 characters. So I have this very simple PHP script prepared here, which is basically is going to get the root of the web one, and it's going to check if the length of the response is longer than 5,000, and if it is, it just finishes, and if it's not, then it finishes with anything else but a zero exit code. So a custom code execution test step is failed if it finishes with a non-zero exit code. And for this step, I also need to select the test agent, and in this case, I'm going to select the test agent in the web subnet, and I'm selecting the PHP version, which 7.4. So this is going to be a good test from inside the virtual network, but I also want to do another step to check whether the connectivity is possible from the office. And here comes the test agent that I'm running inside the office handy, because I can add another step. This is going to be an HTTP step again. And here I select the test agent, not the one in the web subnet, but I'm going to select the office too, because this is the one that I use. This is running here in the office at us. So I'm going to choose that test agent, and the host is web1. So our network configuration at the moment allows us to just use web1, but obviously this host depends on the individual network configurations, because this is now going to go from the office to the Azure subnet, and so other naming conventions might be needed, or other hosts. So the port is going to be 443 again. The protocol is HTTPS. I disable the certification validation again, because the host name is not the usual host name, and I just get the root again. So basically, that's it. That's what is going to happen. Not sending body or headers, and one more step that I'm going to add is going to be a manual step. So the manual step can be used to pause the execution of a test scenario. So I can give an email address, which is going to be my own email address, and so when the test step runs, then an email is going to be sent out to this email address with the description. I can give here instructions what needs to be done, and I also can give a timeout. In this case, I will give 2 hours for myself, 120 minutes to perform any type of manual checks that still needed. If something can be automated, that this is a good way to insert manual actions into this test execution. And I'm just going to say here that manual checks are needed. This can be a lengthy explanation even that what needs to be done, or just a link to an internal knowledge base where it's described that what needs to be tested. So once it's done, I save this, and this new Wenenu webinar is now saved, and I could just run this, or I could schedule this, according to any time zone. I could schedule it for execution, but I'm not going to run this now because we are time constrained because of the webinar. It would take a little bit of time to start and restore the VMs and then stop them. But what I've done earlier, I put together exactly the same test scenario called Azure Backup VM. So basically, these have the same steps. So it starts the same VMs, and it checks the HTTP first, the database connection, and the length from the inside the VNet, and then it tries an HTTP from the office, and then there is the manual check. And I started this before we started the webinar. So if I go to the previous run section, I can see that one execution is running at the moment. If I click on this, then I can see that here are the steps that I put together. I created in the configuration of the test scenario. So the first step, the Azure Backup VM step, it starts these VMs up. So first it starts first it puts a VM from the DB, machine, or the the backup of the DB machine in the DB subnet with this name. This is going to be the target name. It's important if I need to correlate VMs in the Azure portal. And then also it puts another, or restores another, the Web1 VM into the web subnet using this name, and then it creates another VM and runs a Wenenu test agent on top of that. So if I go to the Azure portal and I refresh, then I can see that I'm not only having those 3 VMs, but I have the 2 restored VMs in the resource group that I set in Wenenu, and also I have the test agent running. And so the first real test step after this, it was the HTTP. So this was successful. It returned the 200, the status code 200, and I can see a portion of the body. So it looks good. The database connection also was successful from inside the VNet. So there is no misconfiguration. I can see that from a machine from the web subnet can connect to the database. Connect to the database that's inside the DB subnet, and the length check was also good. I didn't write anything to the output or the standard error, but the exit code was 0, so the length of the response is bigger than 5,000. And then the other step run on the test agent inside our office, and I can see that was also good. So the response was 200, and I can see the response, which is sometimes it can be relevant, not so much in this case, because I just wanted to know that it was a 200. I already checked that the length was good, and then the test execution is now waiting for the manual steps. So all of the steps before are finished, and the manual check is now waiting. It's in the user waiting state, and the current state says that the email has been sent and waiting for user input. And so basically I can show that I got this email, which basically says that manual checks are needed. And if I click on this report progress, then I can report the progress. I can say either it's finished or failed. So in our terminology, a test step that didn't fail, it's not successful or something, it's finished. So I can say it's finished or failed, and in this case I'm going to say it's finished, and I'm going to say that all went well. So I could give a little bit of extra information here if it's failed or it went well. If I submit this, then the desktop has been updated. I got the message, and if I go back to Wenenu, I already see that this manual check is now finished. My report is there in the step details or output, and the stop Azure Backup VM step started to run. And what this step is going to do is going to now delete the 2 restored VMs as well as the VM that runs the test agent. And so basically it's going to clean up after itself. It's going to be like there wasn't anything happening. And so, as I said, I can run this manually, these test scenarios, or I can schedule these at regular intervals. And Wenenu also creates a report for every test scenario execution once it's finished. So our report looks like this. For example, this was the previous execution, because the current one is still running. It says the step count and when it was scheduled, started, ended, and whether it was finished or failed. And also it details the test steps, when they started, ended, and which one was failed or finished. And these reports are also, so I can instruct Wenenu to, if I go to the scenarios, and I can say that I can select email reporting for this test scenario. I can enable email reporting. I can select a time zone. So this time zone is used inside the reports. So if I select another time zone, then the times will change in the PDF reports that we just seen. And I can select an email address. Let's say in this case info@wenenu.com. And if I save this, if I enable reporting, then after every scenario execution. Once the PDF report is created, then Wenenu is going to send it out to the set email addresses, and so I can be sure, companies and organizations in that case can be sure that they get the email every night, every week, every month, what the testing frequency is, and an email is all, the email arrives every time and says that okay, your test was successful or it failed, and so I or the organizations and companies out there, they can have the peace of mind that their backup solution is still working. It works well, and when a real disastrous event happens, then they will be able to recover. They will be able to resume operation quickly. And just one other thing before we wrap this up. So this step is now running. As I said, it's going to delete everything, and most probably if I come here, if it's already there, then yeah, it's already deleted the virtual machines, and it's deleting everything around them at the moment, the disks that the virtual machines had, network interfaces and everything that they have, those are going to be cleaned up. And once it's done, then the test is concluded, and I can, with this method, with Wenenu, users can create very comprehensive tests that test from different locations, that test network connectivity, and they can be sure that their systems are fine and they are running. Or they are recoverable. So when they have some problem, they can restore those machines. So this would conclude the live demonstration part of the webinar, and now we have time for questions and answers.